today's video, we're going to be covering the NFC North. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So in this video, we are going to begin by talking about each individual team. Then we're going to talk about the dynamics of this division. And then at the end, I'll be predicting who is going to win the division and in what order. With that said, let's go ahead and start from bottom to top. We are going to begin with the Chicago Bears and work our way to the Detroit Lions. Now, starting off with the Chicago Bears, as I mentioned, they did go 5-12 last season. Obviously, the beginning of the year, I think they were like 4-2, and then the backstretch was just a complete nightmare. So there was some stuff to work with, but there's obviously a lot of stuff they needed to improve upon. However, what I will say about this Bears team is they're extremely talented, and I don't think any team should be taking them lightly. When you start off with the offensive end, Caleb Williams now is entering into his second year in the NFL. I thought his rookie year was up and down with a lot more downs than up, but I did feel like at the back end of the season, he started to kind of catch a little bit of a rhythm. If he can translate his game from sort of the back end of the year and just get a little bit better under Ben Johnson, then I could see him having a nice, successful upcoming season. One thing I will say about this Bears team, and specifically with Caleb Williams, I think there will be a little bit of some growing pains early on. I just don't think Caleb Williams is the perfect fit within Ben Johnson's system, so I think there will be some like clunkiness early on, but I do think eventually they'll be able to figure each other out, and then both sides can kind of come in the middle and then officially start to be really good together. So expect the first like 5 or 6 weeks offensively to maybe be a little bit disappointing, but I expect by the end of the year, they'll be a lot better. Again, I could be wrong. That's just how I kind of look at it. But outside of Caleb Williams, there's a lot of weapons to work with. They added a weapon in Roma Dunze last year. Of course, DJ Moore still here. And then this offseason, bringing in a Luther Burden and a Colston Loveland to go along with completely overhauling the offensive line. I thought for the most part, what the Bears did this offseason was very smart. Surround your young quarterback with as much talent as possible. Bring in a new offensive-minded head coach and stack the offensive line. Stack the weapons, give Caleb Williams zero excuses not to succeed. And then when you look on the defensive side of things, last year they were really good to start the year off. And then, of course, they fired their head coach. New head coach comes in and the defense kind of fell apart. I do look at this defense and I still have a little bit of some question marks in the edge rushing room because you did bring in Dayo Odeyingbo alongside Montez Sweat. But outside of those guys, you are going to be relying on some younger pieces to be a bit more of your depth options. And something that I think we learned from last year, specifically with the Eagles, is if you have a plethora of pass rushers, like multiple bodies that can consistently get after the quarterback, it gives you a bit of an upper hand. And right now, I just don't know if this Bears edge rushing room, specifically the edge rushing room, has a plethora of bodies that can get to the quarterback. I do think their starters are very good. Montez Sweat, I think, will have a bounce back year. Dayo Odeyingbo is a young guy who can play very well. And then I do think Austin Booker has some potential, but he's a little bit unproven. So there will be some question marks to answer there, but I think the interior is really solid with a lot of young bodies like Shamar Turner, Jervon Dexter, Zach Pickens, and you also, of course, have Grady Jarrett as the veteran in there. So I think that was very smart. Their secondary is very good. All in all, I think this Bears team will be a much better version of what they were last year. Now, will they make the playoffs? It's kind of hard to tell. I do think they have a playoff caliber roster, but again, I think there will be some clunkiness with the offense early on, and Caleb Williams is still a young quarterback, so I'm not too overly concerned about if they make the playoffs. I just want to see a big step forward, and then in 2026 and 2027, that's really when you can focus on making a deep playoff run. But with that said, let's go and move over to the Green Bay Packers. Last year, the Packers went 11-6, and I thought for the most part, they were a pretty darn good team. Defensively, they took a nice big step forward, even without Jair Alexander. And offensively speaking, it was a little bit, I don't want to say disappointing because they were the second highest scoring offense of the 4 teams in the division, but I thought their offense kind of let them down on the occasion. With that said, they still did make the playoffs, and of course they didn't make a playoff run, but they still did make the playoffs. And I think as we do head into the 2025 season, there is a lot to look forward to, but I still do have some concerns with this Packers team. On the offensive end, I really do not have many questions, especially after they did take Matthew Golden to be one of their starting receivers. I love their running back. I think their offensive line is stacked with talent. My big question mark comes on the defensive side, specifically with the secondary. Now, before we get into the secondary, I kind of just want to talk about more of the positives, and then we'll get to the negative towards the back end. Jordan Love is now entering year 3 as a starting quarterback, and I think this is the year where you really want to see that consistency. So far in his career, he has been really good. It's just been at times inconsistent. So if we can get a more consistent version of Jordan Love, then obviously we'll be feeling a lot better about this team. Josh Jacobs had a great year last year. I think this will be a very run-heavy team. And I also do think you can point some of the inconsistencies with Jordan Love on the receiving core, because the receiving core by themselves were all very inconsistent. Dropping passes, availability, stuff that was going on off the field. I think the best thing they could have done was added a guy like a Matthew Golden, who you really just don't have any of those concerns with. He's got excellent hands, smooth route runner, can play multiple different positions from the slot to the outside. Is he the greatest wide receiver one in the NFL? No. In fact, I'd probably venture to say that he is probably the worst wide receiver one in the NFL. And that's not a spot on him. You see my Texas flag. I do think Matthew Golden is best suited as a pure, awesome wide receiver too. But as a wide receiver one with this Packers team, I think it works out quite nicely. Again, to reiterate, I don't think he's a spectacular wide receiver one, but for this team, with Jordan Love and for what this team needs from a wide receiver one, I think Golden gets the job done. As I mentioned, he finds ways to get open. He can be played in multiple positions. He is going to be the safety blanket that I don't think Jordan Love has had in his young career. Pair that with an offensive line that literally is like 6 or 7 deep with a lot of different bodies to work with some new faces and some old faces. I do think this Packers offense could be pretty darn good next year. And when I look at the defense, they were not bad at all last year. Of course, a few years ago, they were not very good, but last year, they were not bad, especially statistically speaking. I will say the defensive line was not spectacular last year, and you're essentially running back the exact same unit plus a Barron Sorrell, who I like Barron Sorrell too, by the way, but I'm not sure what you're going to get from him. Rashawn Gary will hopefully return back to that 10+ sack a season guy. Lucas Van Ness, you're praying will work out because, of course, that's a first-round investment you put on him, and so far, not so good. We'll have to wait and see there. Adrian Cooper will be a bigger part of the linebacking core. He can definitely get to the quarterback. He's a special talent. Again, my one concern, I think this is probably the worst cornerback room in the entire NFL. Like, it's really not good. Now, the safeties are spectacular. Evan Williams had a nice rookie year last year. Xavier McKinney, to me, like, he's a stud. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL. But after you moved off to Jair Alexander, which, by the way, was understandable, injuries and just, some stuff off the field, didn't really work out for this team. But you look at the starters here, Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, and Nate Hobbs. Hobbs is a decent nickel. I think he can get the job done. He's fine in run support, but not spectacular in coverage. He'll be fine, but, again, fine is not going to cut it when your outside corners are Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon, who, in their own regards, are decent players, but neither one of those guys are suited to be lockdown cornerback ones. And when you're in a division with a DJ Moore, a Roma Dunze, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, a Justin Jefferson, and a Jordan Addison, it's going to be difficult for the secondary to stay in front of these guys. It just simply is. I do think the safeties could cover up for some of their flaws, but when this team goes into a man coverage or when they have to get a stop on 3rd and 15, I have a hard time really seeing these cornerbacks consistently stand up and make big time plays. I could be wrong, and hopefully I am wrong. I do think they have a good defensive coordinator that can work around this issue, and I'm not necessarily going to say that this is going to be an issue that affects them too heavily in the regular season. But my big concern comes when you're going up against playoff caliber teams, specifically in high pressure, high stakes games. In those games, offensive coordinators are going to be attacking your biggest weakness on the defense. And if your biggest weakness is your secondary, specifically your cornerbacks, offensive coordinators are going to completely annihilate those guys play after play. And it's going to be really difficult to win those matchups. Again, I'm going to talk about the Eagles here. What was the biggest weakness of the Chiefs? It was their tackles. And what did the Eagles do? Just pressure after pressure after pressure got to Mahomes, and before you know it, it was a double-digit deficit that they could not overcome. I worry with this Packers team that if their offense gets into a bit of a funk where they're not scoring 30 points, can this defense hold up, especially when you're talking about going up against some really good teams? I just don't know. With that said, let's go and move over to the Minnesota Vikings, who finished second in the division. I'll keep this one pretty short because I did go into a lot of detail with the Packers and the Chicago Bears. Minnesota is essentially running back the exact same team with a couple of new faces. Obviously, the biggest change is going to be at the quarterback. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Offensively speaking, though, same weapons, same running back. You did add in a Jordan Mason, which I think could end up being a nice little backup upgrade that can play pretty darn well. And then on the offensive line, Donovan Jackson from the draft is an awesome player. Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, that interior is just completely renovated from last year. And then on the defense, essentially the same faces, but you did add in a Javon Hargrave, and on the secondary, you did lose a couple pieces. This is going to be a really good team. In my opinion, it is one of the most, if not arguably the most talented teams within the NFC. The big question for me just comes down to JJ McCarthy. It's so difficult to predict this Vikings team because they are extremely talented and they have shown the ability to play well even when quarterback play is not necessarily spectacular. They have a great head coach, great defensive coordinator, great talent, great pieces. I have some general concerns about the secondary, like Isaiah Rodgers is going to have to play a massive role for this team next year. Mekhi Blackman is going to have to play a big role. I worry about the safeties a little bit, especially as Harrison Smith is getting older. I do think their defensive coordinator is so smart and so gifted, though, that he can find a way to work around it. But it's kind of the same story that I talked about with the Packers. Offensive coordinators might pinpoint that as a bit of a weakness if it ends up becoming a weakness. And if that is the case, then that could be a little bit difficult to overcome. I was actually a big fan of this Vikings team taking Malachi Starks because I thought he fixed a lot of their issues. They passed on that idea. Can't necessarily say I blame them when they took Donovan Jackson, who was just an awesome fit for this team. Just want to throw that out there. But it's a good team. It's completely and totally dependent upon JJ McCarthy. If McCarthy has a spectacular, I guess, quote unquote, rookie season, then I can see this Vikings team honestly winning the division. That's how talented they are. But if JJ McCarthy has a typical or below average rookie season, then this team is probably going to be like a 10 or 11 win team that's fighting for a wildcard spot. And then lastly, the winner of the division, the Detroit Lions. They won 15 games last year. One of, if not the best offenses in the NFL. When their defense was healthy, they had a spectacular defense. As we all know, down the stretch of the season, they were filled with injuries. Aiden Hutchinson and essentially every single starter missed so much time last year. It was honestly a shame. But the good news is you essentially are running back the exact same team as last year. You do have a couple people gone now. Obviously, your starting center retired. You also lose Carlton Davis, but you replace him with DJ Reed. I don't think this team got significantly better from this offseason because they didn't really make a ton of moves. Again, the DJ Reed move was a nice move, and I think he's a potential upgrade over Carlton Davis, but it's not like a huge significant upgrade. You also added in a Tyleik Williams, some other people from the draft like a Tate Ratledge, but they really didn't do too much in terms of the free agency or even really getting too many impactful guys from the draft. The big thing that did happen this offseason, unfortunately, was the loss of both their coordinators, one going to the Jets to be their head coach, the other going to a divisional rival in the Chicago Bears, which I thought was never going to happen, but lo and behold, it ends up happening. That was pretty crazy. And let's not play around this. This is going to hurt this team. I'm not sure if it's going to hurt this team enough to have them lose the division or, become a bad team all of a sudden. It may end up being a seamless transition from guys that were already in the building and now are taking on a bigger role. It could just be an easy transition, but I don't want to mess around and talk like it's not going to be difficult. I'm going to keep making this comparison for the rest of the offseason with this Lions team, but that 2023 version of the Philadelphia Eagles where you had Steichen, you had Jonathan Gannon, they both become head coaches for the Cardinals and the Colts respectively, and then they bring in some new guys who I think were already in the building. Don't quote me on that, but I think they already were, and then they started off the year pretty good, but then towards the back end, those guys were just not fit for the job, and they got punched in the face in the playoffs and were our first-round exits. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to happen to this Lions team. I just want to throw it out there, put it out there on the internet, put it out there in the world that it is a possibility. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be totally good. It's one of, if not the most talented teams in the entire NFL. I'm not too worried about the loss of their center, not too worried about the loss of other pieces. My one question mark is with the coordinators, and I also have a kind of a positional question mark with the edge rushing room. I love Hutchinson, but he's coming off, I think, a broken leg, so it's going to be difficult to see him getting to 15 sacks next year like he was, I think, on pace to do last year. Right now, you have Marcus Davenport opposite of him. I think you have a good interior defensive line that can get after the quarterback, but I think they're going to have to find some ways to get to the quarterback and in some fun different packages with some different players. I just don't think they have the edge rushers right now. But outside of that, it's a stacked roster. I could easily see them winning the division. Now, briefly, I just want to talk about the dynamics of this division. This is where I want to focus on what the outlook of the division is for the future, who's the favorite to win it, and so on and so forth. So let's get this out of the way. This is a great division. I think I put them as my number 1 ranked division in my division ranking video. So clearly one of the best divisions out there. I think all 4 of these teams are competitive teams with, I think, 2 Super Bowl contenders and 2 playoff contenders. Lions, probably Vikings would be my Super Bowl contenders, and then Packers, Bears will be my playoff contenders. Though I will say the Packers could enter my Super Bowl contenders if the secondary issue is not that big of an issue. And then for the Bears, they're a bit more of that wild card. I don't think they're quite yet Super Bowl contenders yet, but 2 to 3 years down the line, if they keep building this way, they will be. So it's a great division with some great pieces. I do think the Lions will be the betting favorite to win the division again, and it's hard not to see why, because this was a 15-win team last year, and this was all around the fact that they had a shit ton of injuries from, like, I think week 9 and beyond. Like, I think starting from that Cowboys game when Hutchinson got injured, and then everything just kind of was like a domino effect almost, where they were just killed with injuries. They're probably the betting favorite. I would imagine it's probably a tie between Vikings, Packers for the second, and then the Bears are probably, they might be the fun little pick here and there, but I think most people see the Bears as probably a 10-win or 9-win team that won't win the division, but will be very competitive. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how these divisional matchups play out next year, because it's going to be very important for the likes of the Lions, the Packers. In fact, let's not cut around it. It's important for every single one of these teams to have a positive record within the division. Last year, the Lions were 6-0 against the division. The Packers were 1-5 against the division. The Minnesota Vikings were 4-2. I think both their losses were to the Lions. So it's very important for these teams to have good records in their division. I think it's important for the Lions to be, 4-2, 5-1 in the division if they want to win it. Same thing for the Vikings. I think for the Packers, going 1-5 in the division last year was very disappointing. In fact, I think the Packers' schedule was pretty easy last year, and they really dominated all the bad competition. Of course, here and there, a good matchup here and there where they won, but you got to win these tough matchups. Like, you just simply have to. Same thing goes for the Chicago Bears. These divisional matchups, in my opinion, are probably going to be indicators as to who's going to win the division. If we see the Lions go 6-0 in their division, they'll probably win the division. If the Vikings go 6-0, they're going to win it, so on and so forth. And the opposite applies too. If a team goes 2-4 in the division, they're probably the 3rd or 4th seed. It's just kind of how cutthroat this division is. The division is stacked. It's also very young. I would say the oldest team, is it crazy to say the oldest team is the Lions? Probably not. It's probably the Packers or Vikings, but very young teams. Every single one of them has a younger quarterback besides the Lions, but Jared Goff, I think, is like just turning 30 or something like that. He's pretty young as well. He's drafted in 2016, so he's probably in his 30s, but he still has 5, 6, 7 years in him, so it's a young division that's going to be stacked for years to come. And it sucks for Bears fans, because Bears fans are probably like, damn, the one time we are becoming really good in recent memory is the time when the NFC North is loaded with talent. So it's unfortunate for them. It's unfortunate for Packers fans too. All in all, let's now get into my prediction for this division. Now, I want to say this later in the offseason, as we get a little bit closer to the year, I'll be giving a full Super Bowl and playoff predictions video. So I'm not going to predict how many specific wins we're going to get here. I'm just going to predict how I think the division will play out. And then when we get to that video or later in the year, we'll talk about how many wins specifically they'll give. For this video, I might just give you like a range. So in last place, I am going to have the Chicago Bears coming 4th. Now, I want to make something very clear. I do think they'll take a big step forward. They won 5 games last year. I would not be surprised one bit if they double it or get really close to doubling it. My range for the Bears is somewhere between 8 to like 11 wins. Again, I think there could be some clunkiness with the offense early on, but once they get a rhythm going, they're a damn talented team that has all the pieces necessary to win a bunch of tough matchups. My one thing with the Bears, I don't think they're going to win a lot of those really tough games against playoff caliber rosters, just because they're a very young team, and it's going to take some time to build continuity, chemistry, rhythm to go up and compete against the likes of the Eagles, the Buccaneers, Commanders, the Lions, and teams within the division. So I think once they get that continuity and chemistry 2 to 3 years down the road here, that's when you're going to see them become like really top contenders to win the division. In 3rd place, I do want to put the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is, again, it's neck and neck between them and the Packers. I do think it's a really close division. I'm going to put the Vikings at third just because it's so difficult to predict what this team is going to look like when they are literally starting a first-time starting NFL quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Compare that to the Packers, the Jared Goff, and even Caleb Williams, where those guys have a lot more experience than J.J. It's just tough to predict a rookie quarterback to step in there and instantly ball out, instantly have chemistry, instantly understand NFL defenses. I know we saw Jaden Daniels do it, but he's kind of an anomaly. I'm not expecting that from JJ McCarthy. I will say this, the supporting cast around him is fantastic with great coaches, with great pieces around him. So if there was a guy I do think could do it, I think JJ has the chance. My range of wins right now is between 11 to 13, and that's probably a playoff team right there. In second, I am going to predict the Green Bay Packers. I think it's going to be really close between them and the Vikings, and frankly, I think it could come down to the Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers as to who gets that 5th seed in the wild card. The Packers are loaded with talent. I do have some concerns about the secondary, but I think offensively they solved some of their biggest issues with the receiving core, and I think they're really talented. I think Matthew Golden will prove to be a nice investment. My prediction for how many games they're going to win, it's going to be the same as the Vikings. I think it's somewhere between 11 to 13 games. I do have a feeling and a hunch, though, that they will be a better team than the Vikings, even though I think the Vikings might be a bit more talented. It just comes down to Jordan Love having a lot more experience than JJ McCarthy. But at number 1, I do have the Detroit Lions repeating as division champs. I don't think they're going to be a 15-win team, and I'm not going to say they're going to run away with this division either. I think this division is going to be very competitive. I do not see the Lions going 6-0 versus these teams. I think they might go 4-2. 3-3, maybe 5-1. It's all a possibility. I do think they'll win the division. I'm going to predict them to win somewhere between 12, 13, maybe 14 games next year, where they're going to be a competitive team. Their schedule is a little bit tough, but so is everybody else's in this division. I think they'll win enough games, and I'm just not too overly concerned about the losses they had. But you let me know in the comment section below who is going to win the division and who is the underdog of this division. Is it the Chicago Bears or is it the Green Bay Packers? Let me know down below, and I love you guys. Peace.